Welcome to the Renewable Watch Podcast, your front row seat towards really shaping India's renewable energy industry. I'm Mohammad Ali Siddiqui and I'm joined by my co-host Sakshi Bansal. In this episode, we break down the trends in the industry, why they matter and where things might be headed. The stakes are high, the timeline is tight, and the questions are getting sharper. Joining in the episode today, we have Isha Dayal, Research Fellow, and Dr. Bornali Bhandari, Professor at the National Council of Applied Economic Research. We're very happy to have you both on our episode today. So I think we could start off by the directly into the article which really initiated this discussion. The skill gap study basically highlighted a striking gender imbalance in India's green energy sector. Could you begin by highlighting on what were the first few thoughts that prompted this line of inquiry and what were your key takeaways from the data that you analyzed?
So to begin with, let's just say that, focusing upon green energy has been a part of our national determined contributions to the UNFCCC. We have the target to achieve about 50% of cumulative electric power installed capacity from non-fossil fuel-based sources by 2030, to have 500 gigawatt of renewable energy installed capacity by 2030. Of course, these are yet to be updated in December, but that is what we know so far. At the same time, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy has been coming out with its physical achievements, and we've already reached 260 gigawatts as of 31st of October, with a huge share attributed by solar energy and wind energy. So what we see is that there's a lot of growth happening within the sector. And if there's growth happening within the sector, of course, there'll be need for people who drive this growth. At the same time, of course, there have been discussions, there have been government reports talking about how renewable energy has sparked a surge in job creations and job opportunities. We ourselves see that according to the periodic labor force survey data, between 22-23 and 23-24, those engaged in solar energy increased by 86%. And those engaged in other non-conventional sources of energy, like wind energy as well, increased by a massive 206%. We also had the budget 25-26 focusing upon the importance of having a skilled workforce and women employment to reach the Viksit Bharat status. So if you put all of these together, it really then aligns with this line of inquiry, where our key finding has been that in the renewable energy sector, there are skill shortages, that there are not enough people for specific job roles, also that there are skill gaps, that even if you find the people, they do not have the requisite skills that are needed. And also that the solar and wind sectors, they're heavily male dominated and female employment is rather small. Bornali ma'am, you want to take it forward?
Thank you, thank you, Isha, and thank you, Sakshi, and thank you, Ali, for having us here. And very interesting, very kind of you to join our, to invite us in your podcast. And thank you for reading our article. For academics, we always feel happy somebody reads our article. So I think the larger question is that when we did this work of national skill gap study, we actually were asked, one of the objectives was to look at not only designing a skills framework of assessing and anticipating skills, but also to actually how do we increase female labor force participation. So in that process, we looked at 7 high growth sectors, and one of the sectors we identified was green energy. And as within the green energy, why female labor force participation is important has already been highlighted by Isha. So we wanted to look at the sector in the larger context of how can it encourage female labor force participation, and what can we do to encourage it. And the secondary numbers, analysis numbers from PLFS surprised us when we first analyzed the data, that the presence of women were pretty limited. And so it became even more imperative that how can we, as we went on to do other surveys, stakeholder surveys, or talk to people in that industry to understand what were the challenges and what the improvements can be made to improve female labor force participation in this very important and dynamic sector. It's a growing sector, so from that context also it becomes very important. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So on that note, we will obviously dive deeper into the data and the percentages that you had shared in your article. But one interesting thing that I found was that you also held a stakeholder consultation right? And in that, while you were doing that exercise, did you note that the stakeholders of that industry themselves address that there is a lack of diversity on the gender front?
Yes, Isha will expand, but
Yeah.
one answer is yes. Sorry, Isha, go ahead.
Okay, so actually, how we went about doing the study was, of course, we first thoroughly analyzed whatever secondary data we had, and then we dived into, the primary interviews to understand how well the secondary data held true, or if they had anything more to add. So, although we found that there are very few women in the sector, and those women too are concentrated in more supportive administrative job roles, not really engineering technical job roles, like those of keyboard operators, their general office clerks, other sales workers, and mostly the engineering, more technical related job roles, there are only males employed in them. And of course, when we spoke to the stakeholders about these specific female related questions, they really did reiterate the same thing. They acknowledged that the presence of women in solar and wind energy sectors, it's actually small. And it is largely based at the company's corporate offices. And again, the job roles sort of were reiterated again, like, you have women in accounts, project finance, secretaries, in human resource, but also the fact that, there are certain other job roles which are more technical in nature, like you have certain women who are also engineers, engineering pre-design, project coordination, management information system, even in fields like policy and regulatory, where you do have women, but of course, there are very few. So there is a gender imbalance, so to say, in the sector, and women, if at all they're more concentrated largely in support and administrative job roles.
Right. You noted in your article that very few women enroll in industrial training institutes for technical disciplines in the sector. So, what structural or cultural factors are driving this trend, and how can we bridge this early stage skills pipeline gap? Can you highlight on this?
Right. It's a general trend that we've been seeing and hearing across sectors, especially those that require ITI trained people or those from engineering colleges, that women don't offer them. There's a hesitance due to some social norms. But then I think we should also just try and explore other factors that hold special relevance for the green energy sector that we're talking about. For example, in the wind sector, the requirement for a training partner, that is, providing the training to technicians, it is that the institute needs to be close to a wind farm so that they can have on-the-job training. It's not possible for a training institute to set up a windmill. It's just not feasible. So you need to be close to an industry setup to provide that. And the National Institute of Wind Energy that is conducting these courses has set strict criteria on who your training partner can be. You need to have an industry partner, the right teaching infrastructure, you need to have trainers who can, really teach industry trainers ideal, and also hostels. Because whatever said and done, you have wind farms located at remote locations. So when you have an institute set up for training, that will also be at a remote location. We even saw some advertisements to try and understand what, these requirements look like by the industry. And one of the entry conditions is the ability to commute and to relocate. So, I do understand moving forward in our discussion, we might also bring up the topic of, barriers to women participation due to remote locations. But when you have an institute that is itself located at a remote location, it may not be really feasible for women to ideally even go there. So one is about having that sort of a social norm that is preventing them from taking up technical courses, but also if they have to go far, if you don't even have hostels to stay at those institutes, that can be another barrier to participating in these courses. If we talk about solar energy, of course, training institutes can set up solar panels and have those labs for practical training. And the National Institute of Solar Energy has been conducting training across India. But then the demand for solar technicians, the major demand, it is coming from specific states where you have solar farms, solar clusters. How many of those being trained in other regions can really even migrate for jobs? So when you have these issues on the supply and the demand side, then you also question how feasible it is for women to be trained at ITRs for these job roles. So, we also keep hearing from the stakeholders we spoke with that, they're looking out for a locally available workforce. Now, if you want women to be trained at ITI and join the industry, that would imply that local women need to be joining these courses at local ITIs. Now, over here, I think I would believe that a more focused study that can bring out the reasons why those local women from the states that have solar and wind clusters may or may not opt for training, that could be rather useful, to have those specific instances on having that local workforce, creating that local workforce, having local women join the workforce, and why they might not be opting for this is something that, future research should really even look at. Another point, of course, is for salaries, that you join a training if you know that after the training, the job that you get offers you better remuneration. And of course, salary is a very important part of, finding a certain job more lucrative than the other. And irrespective of gender, we also keep hearing that even the people either may not join ITI, or if they might join ITI and have some sort of a technical education, they may still not join the sector because of the salaries. Becoming a delivery worker in a large city might be more lucrative for them. So, such incentives also matter on whether or not you actually end up joining the institute, actually joining technical training for joining the industry later on.
I just want to add to Isha's point. This is complementary, or maybe it's just repeating Isha's point, but just when you talk about the ITIs, you're essentially talking about the supply side of education, right? Because you're talking about the training side. So you want to strengthen your training side to making it this thing, but the training, vocational training specifically, it cannot exist on its own, because it's a job, right? And job depends on demand for anything. So you have to look at demand for these jobs. You have to look at the demand conditions. What are the type of skills that are required for this job? So both Isha and I have heard in stakeholder interviews, like you need someone, suppose I'm just giving an example, that solar demand for wind energy technician is coming from Karnataka. So you need to know the local language, you need to know, irrespective of men or women, you need to be located in that area, you need to know the local language, you need to be able to negotiate between all kinds of people, because people pass by, they want access to land, they want right of way. So you need to manage the villagers, you need to make sure that all the equipment reaches the plant site, so the windmill. So all those issues are important. And not that any woman is less capable of handling it, but both the men and women need to be equipped with those skills. And given the nature of our society or norms, the women need to be more prepared. So you need to go above and beyond the standard skill set to make sure the women are prepared to handle that kind of job. So in that case, if you know the local language, at least it's one less skill to acquire, because you don't have to acquire that local language skill also. And that's why Isha was saying perhaps local jobs could be equally important. So so you have to think through the whole value chain of that. Where do you get trained? Where do you end up? Spatial mismatch is a problem. And the other thing is that, sorry, so I just want this is what I just wanted to emphasize. And the other thing is just getting to the ITI, right? Especially in an industry like this. So one is either you stay there, so you have to have hostels where women can stay, safe places, or you provide transport. We know from other literature that women tend to drop out because there's lack of adequate public transport from secondary schools. So can you imagine going to ITIs? So having safe transport is absolutely critical for women to even reach the supply side. Without roads and roads transport, or without transport, you're automatically cutting access to these women. So that point, it's not a direct point to green energy, but it's a larger point of how to make women reach the ITIs so that they can get access to education. And then the next part, of course. I'll stop here, Sakshi.
Right. There is a widespread assumption that women cannot handle physically demanding tasks, especially in roles like wind turbine operation and maintenance. So do you think that this could change with technological advances like remote diagnostics?
Yes, you correctly note that it can, because after all, we are seeing that, technology is changing at a very fast pace. It's also changing the way we function in an industry. A lot of manual functions we keep hearing are getting automated. So, for example, the cleaning of solar panels is now happening through drones. Even operation and maintenance it can be undertaken through remote diagnostics. There are other roles like, there's a greater need for data analytics for interpreting and predicting wind turbine performance, so to say. You need software to read and forecast solar and wind data. We also keep hearing of there being lifts available at wind farms in the future, which overcome the need for having, to physically climb windmills at all. All of these are, of course, reducing the physical workload on any worker. And again, just to go beyond the green energy sector, even the automobile sector, we keep hearing how automation is playing a very big role in reducing the physical functions, loading and unloading being performed by machines. There are also all-women assembly lines for electric vehicles. So what we are seeing is that if this physically demanding nature of task, if this is one of the factors that is holding back gender inclusion in sectors like these, including the green energy, then of course, by removing that constraint, we are likely to see progress towards gender inclusion, if this constraint is lifted. Now, if you remove that constraint of having, a physical strength to do any task, or, a physically demanding or taxing work, then of course, then you have tasks that will require and potentially even value intellectual prowess over, any physical strength. So that's, I think, a movement in the right direction when we talk about gender inclusion, so to say.
Right. Uh, Again, which roles do you think in the green energy value chain offer the most promise for the gender diverse employment growth over the next 5 to 10 years? Which are the most meaningful of them, if you can mention some of them?
Yeah, sure. We did ask, stakeholders that where do you see women employment going? What are the sectors where you might have more women joining the sector in near future? Let me just begin by saying that there is a silver lining towards gender inclusion, because many firms that we spoke with, they do place an emphasis on, treating all job applications at par, be it from male candidates or female candidates. A lot of them have policies for prevention of sexual harassment at work. So they have posh policies and committees. Many are also providing fresh facilities at office premises. I mean, corporate office premises, not really at the plant locations, because there's not been a need so far for that. And also there were certain firms that talked about having their, giving an incentive to their employment agencies if a woman candidate is hired in a technical job. And they have these technical committees to encourage participation of women in technical job roles. So, firms themselves are looking for women across the board job roles, including the technical ones. So there are returns to skilling if women really want to acquire formal technical and vocational education and training. And in times to come, we do see prospects of increasing women employment in job roles like resource assessment and forecasting, power system design, plant engineering, project management. Of course, also the other support job roles that we've already talked about, be it in the administration, be it HR, accounts, of course, that all remains. But these are additional technical job roles where firms are keen to hire more women, and they see a role for women coming forward.
What specific steps should policymakers should take to make the green energy ecosystem more gender responsive? Would gender-based skilling quotas or dedicated fellowships help in this case? Or
No, I'm not a huge favor of quotas, honestly, because quotas don't help anyone. We know that from the market, it just creates, introduces inefficiencies. Fellowships, yes, they may help, definitely. But remember the whole value chain. It can go from the site manager to researcher in green energy, or wind energy or other energy. So there's a whole gamut of things. What fellowships can have is have more presence of women in the energy sector. But as I said, repeatedly said, or what Isha also said, strengthening our training and training system, skilling system. Universities, it's not just about the ITIs, right? Because a lot of training engineers are coming from engineering universities, colleges. So you need to strengthen them there also, encourage things. So it's not just about skilling. It's from the demand side, the wages, but from the supply side, access to universities and colleges. Then working on their career counseling and mentoring, that women can also achieve this XYZ jobs, and they have safe jobs, they can earn jobs, they can actually progress in the jobs. Everybody wants career progression. You do, I do, everyone does. So career progression is there. So you give them the long-term career path. So that when mentoring and career counseling is so important for women. So we need to get into this. And of course, the usual things that have been said about skills, I don't need to repeat it, need to improve teachers, need to improve facilities, need to improve curriculums, more on the job training, more hands-on training, more practical training, all that is there. But for women, you need above and beyond that you need to have very good mentoring, very good career counseling, and telling them repeatedly, right, that it's possible for them to achieve whatever they want to do. That it's not restrictive. I think that is very, very important to achieve that. And I think even you might think I'm being silly, but maybe I'm being silly here. But like Isha talked about local jobs, right? Or even you talked about local jobs. So catch in schools and go to schools and tell them that the job roles can exist. This job role becomes aspirational for the local women there, that they want to be. People say, I want to be an IS officer, I want to be a collector. Now, this becomes a demonstration. I want to be the plant manager or the site engineer in this my windmill plant or windmill plants. So it becomes an aspirational for women to be in this job role, that I can do it while living in my local area. I can thrive. And that from school onwards, you start career counseling, mentoring, and then continue that till they get on their job. It can work. I'm sorry, I'm repeating my point third time, but skills plus a little more in terms of access and readiness, in terms of socio-emotional skilling training, can help women to get there, to be part of the main force. And of course, what Isha said on the demand side is offices, prevention of sexual harassment, providing crashes, providing care, providing support. Even mentoring in offices can help women to achieve the best of the potential in this industry.
Right.
Thank you.
So, because we're talking about skill, your research pointed out to a very important caveat, right? So the Surya Mitra program is supposedly, it should have trained over 57,000 workers. But based on your analysis of the PLFS data for 22 to 23, it shows, we're not able to find any workers. Am I right? So could you please talk more about this?
Isha?
Yeah, so actually we were really surprised when we were looking at the secondary data, and then we were looking at these programs and how many people they are training. And we were really confused because the numbers were nowhere close to matching. There are programs, of course, like you mentioned, the Surya Mitra, there's a Vayu Mitra program for wind energy. It has been training people for those specific job roles. But then when you look up those job roles in our secondary data, you don't find workers, which is questionable. Like, why should it really be happening? And then we went on to understand how PLFS and how secondary data might even be collected and understood by researchers, and how, sample surveys are conducted. So what we note is that periodic labor force survey, by its name, is a survey, it's a sample survey. So in every round, there are different people being in a way interviewed. Now, what can happen is you can have changes in the number of job roles reported, in the number of workers reported in a same sector in subsequent surveys. So it sort of limits your understanding of a sector on a continuous time series basis. You might have workers popping up suddenly in 1 year and not popping up for the next 2 years, sudden job roles popping up suddenly. It becomes difficult to match current running programs for specific job roles and finding those job roles in a time series, coherently in the secondary data. And hence, there are certain, there's a recommendation also in our report if ma'am wants to take it forward regarding having sector-specific surveys. Ma'am, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Isha. Just want to add to Isha's point that, and here we are economists here, we are using a technical language that we economists use. What we call is the National Industrial Classification and National Classification of Occupations, NCO code. So when we were doing the work, essentially last year in the early part of this year, but we find that a NIC code for some renewable energy sectors did not even exist. So it's that if you see the NIC 2025 that has just come out on 18th of November, that has now got wind energy as a separate sector. So, you could not even find out how many workers because you didn't even know that which one was the wind energy sector. So that's one part of the problem. The second part of the problem was that in what we call the NCO codes, the National Classification of Occupations, in there, the PLFS, the Periodic Labor Force Survey data, only gives us data by 3-digit level, whereas the actual occupation goes up to 8-digit level. So when you have this kind of difference, you cannot figure out who is who, because you might have this. I'll give you for the one that I remember just out of my head is that for the textile sector, with the same work for textile sector. Sorry, Isha, going away from green energy, but essentially we have the same code for a power loom weaver also and a hand loom weaver also. So if you have the same 3-digit code, I remember it because I've used that example so many times. And then what happens is when you use the same 3-digit code, but your job or occupation need maybe in hand loom or power loom, which requires very different set of technologies and therefore skill sets. But you cannot distinguish from the PLFS data of which one do you need, hand loom or power loom. So therefore you need to be very specific, but that kind of granular data is not collected by the government, and that's why we actually recommended that you should do something called an occupational wage employment survey, which would actually help you for non-agricultural sectors, of course, which would actually help you collect that kind of data in employment workers and therefore project the type of workers you need and skill sets that you would need. So that was one recommendation that we had, but you would have to go down to the 8-digit NCO level. The second recommendation that we actually had was that firms should do more regular surveys of firms that will give you vacancy rates. What are the vacancies that are arising and which vacancies are hard to fill? That will also give you a signal about which jobs are hard to fill. The other ones is, of course, we said that you should use big artificial data or not AI data, big data from jobs that are advertised across websites. You use that to actually write about or figure out where the job shortages are, what type of jobs are needed, what the job shortages are, which ones are not filled, which regions need these jobs. So you use when you're trying to find out skill shortages, you have to use a variety of methods to triangulate this information where the jobs are arising, because there's so many changes that are happening. Stakeholder surveys is another one of them, because from there we detect these technological changes that are taking place that may not even be captured in numbers. So then only will you figure out these things. But the basic step to even collecting the data in a sensible manner, measurable manner, and in a dynamic manner, and where you can compare each other's information is getting the right occupational data. So the example that I'm now giving everyone is that for macro, like as macroeconomists, we always look at GDP, inflation rate. What should we as people working in skills and jobs be looking at? You should be looking at the NCO codes, tracking your jobs through the NCO codes, and that will give you, which jobs are in, what jobs are in need, where the jobs are needed, where the shortages are arising, and there's associated skill sets that are needed. So something we didn't, and I like to start with any skills work, I like to start with this same idea that skills are an indirect demand. Demand is a product of the service. Since the demand for renewable energy is going up, jobs that are needed in the renewable energy sector will be going up. So it's it's directly tied. And as technologies evolve, similarly, the job skill sets that will be needed will also be evolving. So we need to change according to that. Sorry, again, giving you a long-winded explanation to
No, I think it was a very important explanation. These are all the questions that we had. That's it from our side. If there are any conclusive comments that the two of you would like to make, or any question that you think we haven't asked.
You've just touched the tip of the pyramid. You haven't, the tip of the iceberg. You haven't touched the whole iceberg yet. No, I'm kidding. And thank you so much for inviting
Yes,
us.
it's the time constraints that we had. Yeah.
No. Thank you so much for inviting us.
Yeah.
And if you have, thank you for having us over. Sorry, Isha, it's your.
No, I really appreciate Ali for reaching out. Sakshi, thank you so much. I mean, of course, you've touched upon a very important topic. It brings together two very important issues into one, which is what we began with, why we, the importance of the study and how it all started. So it's been a great discussion. Thank you.
Yeah.
And we will be working upon it more as well. Gender is a big topic that we are taking forward as well at our workplace. So look forward to future discussions as well.
Yeah, sure. We'd love to have you for future episodes. Thank you very much. Thank you for giving your time.
Thank you so much. Really.
Goodbye.